1, I will call the meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Schrader.
Here.
Mr. Schatzinger.
Here.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Gallops.
Here.
Mrs. Kane. Mr. Wirtz.
Here.
Mr. Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading from Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Let us pray. Lord, lead us from untruth to the truth. Lead us from darkness to the light. Lead us from death to the eternal life. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Howard, seconded by John. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? As approved. Any public comment? No public comment. All right, moving on to our first item, presentation of the 2020 financial statements and audit.
Amber is here from CLA. Turn it over to. Thank you.
So my name is Amber Jurisky. I'm with CLA, the firm's, or the city's accounting firms who performs the financial statement audit. And we did the audit for December 31st, 2020. So you should have received a couple documents. I'm going to start with the document titled Financial Statements and Supplementary Information. And I'm going to go to page 1 of that document. This is our independent auditors report. And at the top, it talks that we audited the accompanying financial statements, so the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presenting component units, each major fund and the remaining aggregate fund information for the city of Ripon as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. Our responsibility is to issue an opinion on those financial statements. On the top of page 2, you will see that opinion, and in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the city as of December 31st, 2020. That is a clean, unmodified opinion, the best opinion we can provide from an audit standpoint. Then I am going to skip to page 14. Page 14 and 15 are the city's government-wide financials, is what that is called. This incorporates all of your long-term capital assets, long-term debt, your proportionate share in the Wisconsin retirement system, and those types of items. The one item I want to draw your attention to is there is a net pension asset on here, and some may wonder, what is that? That is the Wisconsin retirement system, and that has previously been in a liability position in the prior year and now is in an asset position. And that just is determined based on contributions, markets, all of that kind of thing, nothing that the city can control. And we do restrict that amount of money in the net position down below on the bottom of page 14. On page 16 starts your fund financials. So this starts what we call basically what summarizes your operations from a day-to-day basis. And I just want to draw attention to the general fund and your tax incremental district number 11 on this page, on page 16. So your general fund finished with a fund balance of just shy of $2.5 million as of December 31st, 2020. On page 64, it talks about your minimum fund balance policy and where the council has in the past set that they want to be at the end of the year. And the council has set 20% of general fund operating revenues. And currently you're at 1.4 million in your unassigned, which is what we use as the benchmark. And you should be about just over 1.1. So overall in the general fund, that's a good position to be in. We have talked about maybe looking as you continue to receive new CARES money and COVID-related funds to maybe revisit that policy and look at the expenditure side versus the revenue side. So that's just one suggestion that we had, but there's nothing wrong with that. And it's in good financial position here in the general fund. So in the tax incremental district number 11, if you just slide over under the fund balances, that tax incremental district has about 3.2 million, which is a good fund balance, but you have to remember there's approximately $6 million in debt in that TID. So, and that is all summarized in the other bond document that you should have received, and that will show your net unreimbursed project costs, and will show your outstanding long-term outstanding debt that remains on those funds. Page 18. This kind of shows your revenues and expenses and how you got to your ending fund balances. In summary, the general fund had a change in fund balance of just over $330,000. So a good year from that perspective. And there is a full budget to actuals detail on page 82 and 84 that will show you by function from an expenditure standpoint and by category from a revenue standpoint. So you can see where you fell within your budget. Any questions on the general fund before I kind of get into the utility? Okay. Page 21. These are your proprietary funds, so your wastewater and water utility and your internal service fund. Page 21, the wastewater has a couple things to kind of draw attention to. There is currently no operating cash in the wastewater fund. There's about 1.3 million in restricted cash, which is restricted from equipment replacement perspective that the DNR kind of places on the utility. The water utility has approximately 200,000 in operating cash and about 412 in restricted cash, and that relates to some debt that requires a reserve set aside for future debt payments. On page 22, when we talk about the net position of the utilities, the wastewater utility has a total net position of about just shy of 3.7 million. About 2.6 of that is made up of the capital asset, the net investment in the capital asset. So that's the capital value, less the accumulated depreciation, less any corresponding debt that would relate, or accounts payable that would relate to those capital items. And then you have that 1.3 million that's set aside for future capital replacement, and then the pension benefits from the pension asset perspective. So an unrestricted amount of just shy of 350,000 of a deficit in that wastewater utility. So as we get into the utilities, there's a couple other things I'll draw attention to, including on page 23, but we want to make sure that we're looking from a rate perspective. Are your rates in alignment with what your capital needs are? And I believe you have a presentation coming up tonight to kind of talk about what your capital needs are. And we want to make sure that we revisit that and kind of look at that from a long-term perspective, not a short-term. On page 23, this will give you a picture of how you got to your net position at the end of the year. Your water utility finished with a deficit change in fund, net position of about $15,000 to end at just shy of 4.6 million. The wastewater had a deficit of about 108,000 to end at about just shy of 3.7 million that I mentioned before. This operating revenues and expenditures statement doesn't really give you a good picture. So we like to look at the cash flow statement. So on page 24, at the top, we'd like to look at what are you generating from your operations in terms of revenues, net revenues that you would have, and then are you able to pay your debt payments and your capital needs out of those funds from operations. So the wastewater utility had cash provided by operating activities of about $31,000, and the net change in cash was about $81,000 to the positive, but there was very limited capital activity during 2020, only about $22,000 in the wastewater. The water utility had a change in cash and cash equivalents of a deficit of approximately $600,000, and a lot of that has to do with there's a pilot transfer out, a change in the interfund activity between the water and sewer, and then obviously the debt payments. Again, very little capital activity in 2020 for the water side. So that's something that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to, because what that does is just eat into your operating cash year over year. Any questions on the utilities? Okay. Then I'm going to skip to, and I'll mention there's some graphs in the management letter that I'll reference again, but page 94 is where I'm going to go. This is our independent report on internal control. So as part of the audit, we ask a series of questions. We review a number of your different departments, policies, those types of things. And so we review the internal control. We do not express an opinion on the internal control, but we are required to disclose any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we find. And at the bottom of page 94, you can see that we have one material weakness, and that is preparation of this annual financial report, meaning we prepare this report, and with the number of GASB standards and disclosures, it's very common. We prepare a lot of these for a lot of our clients. So no concerns from that perspective. And then I'm going to go to this small 2-page stapled document as we're talking about internal controls. So as part of the internal controls that we review, during that review with the transition and looking forward at the CARES money that was received in 2020, looking at what's going to be received in 2021 with the ARPA money, we thought it would be a good time, and we worked with Adam and Ann on this as well, to kind of remind the council, remind the city of the importance of bringing your policies and procedures up to date and making sure that you're enhancing those year over year. So part of what is likely to happen with the city is you could be subject to a federal single audit in the coming year for 2021 or 2022, depending on your level of federal expenditures. And one of those requirements is to have a written policies and procedure manual, which also just kind of plays into your everyday operations, not just federal funding. So that's what we're talking about here, is policies and procedures, just some ideas to enhance the internal controls. We talk about, when you have departments, you have a number of decentralized departments, bringing that information, having one centralized location to summarize information. Establish responsibility, provide a handbook that has some direction from a process standpoint, and kind of making sure that with technology we know it changes, making sure that things are being updated accordingly with that as well. Talk about a couple different things in here, flexibility with implementing and communicating, and talking about understanding. Part of that is cross-training, making sure that there's proper segregation of duties, and a number of those types of things. So that's something we're always willing to help the city with whenever there's questions on that, but just something to make sure that you're revisiting throughout the year. And that should always be, that's not just a one-time thing, but we have included this in a number of our clients this year, because we feel it's a really, really good time with, again, transitions, all the federal funding and state funding that is coming down the pipe. Then there's a little thicker stapled document. This is our management communications. We're required to disclose this and provide this to the council. So on page 1, just kind of re-summarizes our audit and our intent. Talks about the policies. There were no new accounting policies in 2020. Talks about the accounting estimates. So within the bound document, you have accounting estimates that include the depreciable life of your capital assets, your fair value of your investments, accumulated sick leave, allowances for uncollectible accounts in terms of the EMS billings. That's something that we've also talked with Adam and Ann about, and we've been talking about with city management for a number of years to continue to monitor and bring that, making sure that that's a constant discussion point. The estimate for the net pension asset and liability, and the other post-employment benefits for the GASB 75 life insurance participation with the state. We did not have any difficulties performing the audit or working with management, and no disagreements. Then, on page 5, this is just a summary of all of the governmental fund balances. We'll show you 2020 compared to 2019. You can kind of go through that. No significant changes. The tax incremental districts will fluctuate depending on the capital expenditures during the year. But again, there's a summary of the tax incremental districts in this document. Page 6, this will show you your general fund, just kind of a summary of your fund balance composition and where you are with your policy over the last 5 years. So that gives you a picture. The one that I kind of want to draw your attention to is where you've been in terms of your policy. So you've kind of fluctuated, and since 2016 has kind of come down a little bit in terms of where your policy has been. In 2016, you were at about 33%, and now you're at 25. In 2019, you were at 20, so you did come back up. But continue to monitor that, because as you build your budgets and with some uncertainty, you want to make sure that you're not eating into that fund balance too much. So you want to make sure you're at where you will need to be. And then on page 8, as I talked about the utility, the water utility is required to file an annual report and with the Public Service Commission, and as part of that, they calculate the rate of return. And at the top of page 8, that shows you a graph of where the city's rate of return has been since 2016 to 2020. Back in 2016, you were at 5.72%, and the city's authorized at 5%. And in 2020, you ended at 1.22% compared to your authorized rate of 5%. 2019 was 1.95%, 2018, 4.35%. So you can see it's continuously come down. So that's been a discussion point that we've had, but again, this capital improvement discussion and plan has been something that we've been talking about as well with the city, as that's a big part of the planning process to kind of go into from this rate perspective. I think that's all I kind of wanted to touch on in this document. Most of the rest of this document is the management representation letter from management taking responsibility for the financial statements. Any questions?
Just so I make sure that I understand it in common people's terms, you said that there was very little capital activity in 2020 from water utility, and that eats into the operating budget year to year. Is that, can you explain more as to why?
So what that does is, I think there was about, in the sewer utility, there was about 23,000 of capital asset acquisitions, and about 32 in the water utility. And a lot of times municipalities will borrow for that. You're going to borrow for it, but you have to have a way to pay it back. And if you're not generating the revenues from your users, then you're digging into your reserves to be able to pay for those acquisitions or pay the debt on those capital expenditures. So as you go through, what we always recommend is to kind of sit down and look at from a long-term perspective, what are we gonna need for the utility? Kind of try to forecast what the DNR and what the state's gonna tell you that you need to do, because they have a big part in that. And then you can kind of forecast and you can kind of play your rates a little bit. The water rates, you are restricted by the Public Service Commission, so you can apply for a simplified rate increase, which is 3% per year, but a lot of times some municipalities don't qualify depending on where your rate of return is, and there's a number of different things. Or you can do a full rate case that goes into much more detail, but also requires a lot of that planning from a capital perspective, because they want to know what are you going to do and what do you need to do, what do you need to pay back debt or to fund those capital projects out of your cash, if you're going to not borrow and you're just going to kind of stockpile that cash. So otherwise you're just eating, it's just like having a savings account and, hey, I'm going to go shopping and I'm going to continuously buy $1,000 worth of things week after week. Eventually that's going to go away. So, and the equipment replacement on the sewer side, there's certain things that you can purchase out of that, and then there's other things you can't. So it kind of is based off of a replacement listing. And if what you need isn't on that replacement listing, technically that shouldn't come out of that equipment replacement fund.
Thank you.
So, and just to be, so both utilities financially, looking at the report, struggled this past year. The rates of return, some of the numbers are not as good as they have been in the past. And we will have a presentation next talking about the water utility. We're also doing a project right now where there's going to be debt taken out to help pay for it through the Clean Water Fund and Safe Drinking Water Loan programs at the DNR. So, looking at the financial statements, the position of where we are sort of headed, and with these added projects and the future projects we need to really start planning for, the next step in this is from the water side is a full-blown rate case, not a simplified rate case. We are going to need to look at a full rate case for the water utility. And the sewer utility, similarly, because of some of the financial difficulties of the past couple years, we are going to need to look at those rates as well. PSC governs everything on the water side, but it's really an important time with all of these things kind of coming together now, primarily on the water side, to do a rate case and to begin, handling some of this as well as what we need for the future.
And I think, to piggyback off of that, the council has a lot more, they have the ultimate decision on the sewer side. The state does not restrict the sewer portion. Any other questions? Otherwise, if there are any follow-up questions, Adam or Ann, they all have our contact information, and feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to have a discussion. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have a presentation of the water system master plan.
Got everything? So just a little background here. Randy and Dan are here from SEH. SEH over the last, couple years, after the sanitary sewer in 2019, began working on this master plan for the water system to address some of the concerns brought up by the DNR regarding the overall condition and overall management of the water utility. So this is the final report. Now we'll turn it over to SEH.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Just to expand on Adam's intro, I'm Dan Schaefer. I'm primarily a wastewater engineer with SEH, and I got involved about 4 years ago working with the wastewater utility to help them through the final phosphorus planning as well as some of the chloride source reduction measures. And then introduced Randy to the staff here at the water utility, and that's really how we got started, as Adam mentioned, with the DNR's sanitary survey, and which led to development of this water master plan. So just a high-level overview, and then I'm going to transition to Randy for all the technical details on the water side. But for those that aren't overly familiar with the water system, a single pressure zone served by 2 water storage tanks and 4 wells that provide drinking water into that system, each of the wells having a booster pump to feed the water towers. Currently, well number 5 has a water treatment plant. One other well number 8, had filtration previously that's not being used. But as a high-level overview, that is the system. The average demand right now is about 1 million gallons per day. As a little bit more background, and I think Amber painted a picture of part of the reason why the funds aren't there potentially is the city's growth has leveled off, and in fact, population projections, depending on who you look at, but the 2020 comprehensive plan projection does show kind of flat to decreasing growth over the next 20 years. I know there's been some industrial changes that have resulted in the loss of large water users as well. So some of that as a backdrop kind of paints the picture as to why the state of the finances are on a downward trend. So Randy, I'll let you take it away from here.
Thanks, everybody. I'm Randy Sanford. I'm a potable water, drinking water engineer with SEH. I've been with SEH for 27 years, and I've done this type of work and presentations in many communities in Wisconsin throughout my career. As Dan mentioned, we not only look at population, but we look at, next slide, we look at your demand history and your water usage. So that history is important to us as well in planning. But you can see kind of that average day, max day, man, all this information is registered with the PSC or your team of water staff that are collecting this and then reporting it on an annual basis. And as Dan mentioned, we've seen as high as 2.45 million gallons of pumping in 2007. There's some drought in that year, and there were some fires in that year. So we have looked at kind of that maximum day demand, the average day demand within your system over time, and we try to get at least that 15 to 20 years worth of data just to make sure we're looking at all of it. We start to categorize that. How does that look from your existing system? What we're trying to do is evaluate where this system is at. It started years ago. We understand that this system was passed on to or purchased by the city back in 2005, I believe that was. So from that date, you've been doing really good at tracking these things. Water history here was just from the information. Generally, PSC likes to see less than 10% water loss or unaccounted for water. And that could be anywhere from leaks to meters that don't read properly. It could be inaccurate flushing measurements and so on and so forth as water systems do collect that. You're around 15%, a little higher than what PSC would like to see, but we're generally in a good range. This is, again, just a little bit historic of your total pumpage, but the line you'll see here is a per capita or a residential consumption of your total pumpage. And you can see that on some of the next slides, Dan, that not only is you have residential consumption, but we have commercial unaccounted for, industrial water. All of that was taken a look at under your existing umbrella of information about this. One thing I can just glean here for you is on your residential per capita is around 40 gallons, which is actually pretty good for a residential community of your size. I've seen it as high as 65 gallons per day, per capita per day. which is very high for a community, but your community really utilizes this water good from a residential standpoint. Next slide. Then what we do with that information, that historical data that I just kind of showed you, is we use it along with your census data, your comprehensive plan population data. We project what you could be seeing in the future. The projections to the right is for what we would then project for Ripon's future capital improvements plan as Andrew was stating before. Next slide. So in order to do those projections, we want to make sure what we have, what is appropriate, what condition it's in, and where you're at. As Dan mentioned before, you have one main pressure zone, which is fairly simplified for a water pressure system, which is good, but 4 main wells, 1 treatment plant. You have a number of ground storage reservoirs, 4 booster stations. You have 2 elevated towers that provide pressure to everybody. Roughly 46 miles of water mains that maintain throughout your system. Next slide. The agencies that review, EPA hands down federal mandates. Wisconsin has the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, who implements the mandates. As part of that, the NR's code system, we look at some of those general agency review opportunities at 100 PSI, minimum of 30 PSI we have to stay in. In any type of emergency condition, we have to maintain 20 PSI in all of your water pipes to make sure that there's no bacteria, no viruses that get activated. With that, we also are concerned about fires. We've had some fires and you have higher commercial and industrial use here, so we want to make sure you have enough fire flow. We look at ISO ratings and what your fire department might mandate in your city. Next page. So we start to look at your existing pressure zones. Your existing pressure zones look fairly good. Everything in blue, what we want to look at is within that 100 PSI. Everything in red kind of revolves around elevation. And so there's a little bit higher pressure zone that's established where you see some red dots, not a concern. You've been maintaining that over time with some home pressure reducing valves, so that's regulated by the Department of Health and DOA in Wisconsin, so not a concern at all for pressure. What we do want to look at next system is more about, do you have enough water for the existing community? And do you have enough water for the future? Do we have enough storage? And so we start to look at your 4 wells that you have, your existing capacities. We look at your reservoir ranges that you have. We start to add those up. If you can see the total storage that you have is about just over 1 million gallons of storage, which is a good amount of storage for a community like you have, so we're very adequate. However, what DNR likes to see and recommends is that, and this was identified in a survey, a recent survey that was in 2019, that with 1 well out of service that you're able to pump that maximum day capacity. Well, you can see that if 1 well out of service, you're slightly deficient in your wells or your water supply based on that evaluation of firm pump capacity. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. Another item that we look at, not just supply and storage, but what kind of water quality we have. We're going to say 5 wells. But well number 5 has pumped a lot of water for you. It's a really good well for you. Has some iron and manganese concentrations. It does have an existing treatment plant to take that out. It takes out a lot of the iron and manganese. However, it does leave you with some concentrations within your system. It's tired, your system is tired, and it's in need of some updates, and we'll get into that a little bit. However, not just 5, go back 1 minute. 6 has a little bit of iron, a little bit of manganese, so does 8. And 9 is in pretty good shape, but it has its own issues as well. So we want to make sure that we don't leave water demands out of it and what your supplies are with water quality, because not just water producing on the ground, but water quality could also have a well shut down for different reasons. So we also wanted to look at the total amount of water that each of your individuals well pump. And you can see the importance of treated water, even though it is a little tired, but well number 5 is your highest capacity well, and it has a lot of good attributes, which is iron and manganese removal. At this time, almost pumps half of your water on an annual basis. That's a lot for that one well to try to keep up with. The other ones are broken into a quarter each almost, with well number 8 being the most tired and most undesirable to use. It has some sand problems. So you are able to use them, but your operators have done a really good job of using your best wells now. But we're looking at evaluating the long-term operating procedures of each one of those wells. Not just the wells themselves that pump out of the ground, but your facilities, the building that goes on top of it, the pumps inside, the building around it that protects it, what kind of shape is it in. We did walk through each site, not only with ourselves. DNR did that in 2019 and made some recommendations. One of the reasons that we get hired, and your staff walked through those individual wells on the page. And we evaluated each one of those, and again, I use the word tired because your system is not failing. It's still in really good shape right now. But it is tired and it needs some improvements. And that's not unlike any of the water systems across the United States. They need some improvements. It has been 16 years since you took it over. Prior to that, it was held privately. And we'll get into just a little bit of that and some alternatives. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, I do believe that the previous to this slide, the last 2 slides, this one and the previous one, were not included in our packet. Do you think that your presentation could just be emailed to us after?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Super, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just lastly on the DNR survey, they had commented about some undersized piping in your system, and we did look at that with the comments that we saw within there, and based on your most current information about pipes, there's a little over 155 feet of 1-inch diameter pipe, which the minimum size for DNR on a main is 6-inch now, and so these are very much showing this. Not a lot, but there's some, a little over 100 feet of 1.25 inch, a little over 1,700 feet of 2-inch diameter, and just over 7,000 feet of 4-inch diameter. So over that next 20-year program, there's a fair amount of removal and replacement of just the less than 6-inch diameter water mains that need to be pulled out and replaced, and that can happen over time. But definitely want to keep an eye on that type of map. Again, there's some additional deficiencies that our team looked at just from a water quality standpoint. Well number 8 has some filters that were abandoned, in the past, so they don't work anymore, but they're still there. Well 8 does have some water quality issues. There's some review and inadequate power. If you have power outages, there is some emergency water pumping available, but not a lot, so we want to make sure that you have adequate emergency pumpage. So that's going to be addressed in this as well. And this is just an example of what a review this was. Well, it did have a standing gravity support bed that was removed or was taken out of service, so that well does not have any more use at that well. But, next one, slide.
Working on it.
Next. Help them up individually. So a couple of things with the report. Giving you a lot of high-level information. Think of our report as the 30,000-foot look. It does give you, we're going to evaluate it and kind of get into the recommendations here. But under supply, storage, treatment, we look at each one of those. And under supply, we did go through with that firm pumping capacity with one well out of service, being able to pump that max day. we don't have that. So our recommendation is that a 5th well is needed to meet those requirements. Your storage, as I mentioned, you have very adequate storage, so that's good for the next 20 years on that, based on your growth. Treatment, again, evaluating that for any reason right now, well, number 5 or well number 8 goes out of service, you would really be struggling to have water. However, that hasn't happened. Your staff has really maintained as much as they can right now to the best of their ability. So, but we do want you to start almost immediately looking at how we can get more reliable water quality out of the existing infrastructure that you have. So that's a recommendation. And then your distribution system, of course, with all of the pipes less than 6 inch in your system over a 20-year period, we're recommending replacement of all of that if possible, based on money and budget. So the truth, kind of your existing facilities that we have, we did have to create a water model. And I say that because your existing system with the smaller size water mains, with your wells spread out across the city, with 2 towers and some ground storage reservoir, it's a complicated system. I say it's an easy one zone pressure, but it's a complicated system. We were able to take a previous model from our previous consultant back in 2008, I think that was, but needed some help updating. And we built that model out, we calibrated with field staff here in Ripon, and then we were able to verify some conditions out in the field and really get to a calibrated model. But is it perfectly calibrated? Of course not. It's just a model. Like finance, we try to model with water, but we can get to a pretty useful model that will help us use as a tool to test case and scenarios to make sure we're giving you recommendations that will meet the deficiencies that you have. So we did have a number of deficiencies that I went over high level. We do have all of those labeled in a report that Adam has, and you'll all be able to get the same report and review. But high level, there's a lot going on alternative A, but high level, there's a water treatment plant that would be recommended. And that water treatment plant would be to build a new well and then connect it on the other side of the river with well number 11. So we have a new water treatment plant. And that would be city-owned. There are some other issues, deficiencies, I would call them, with land and leases that came from your previous owner. That would help to clean those up as well. So all of those deficiencies we kind of ran through with an alternative with your staff. We ran the model and everything does work within the model. Go to the next page. We also looked at combining the water treatment plant near the existing well supply station and abandonment on a new site. Again, taking an existing piece of infrastructure that you have and reversing it and reusing it as a raw water line, thereby having a water treatment plant on this side. So we kind of look at alternatives and not only compare costs, but run the model to make sure that it's going to work. Our recommendation is being put into as alternative B with some costs that are outlined in our capital improvement plan. You go to the next page. Well number 8 would be planned to stay. However, if you remember in my chart, well number 5 was the major producer. Well number 8 has some of its own issues. We recommend to keep that, but we recommend that we really get into looking at rehabilitation of that. So, next slide. Knowing that we have some capital improvement plans to at least 2, if not 3 of your wells, we want to lay out not necessarily a 100-foot look at a plan, but a 30,000-foot look at a plan, so you can start to do some long-term planning on the investment capital side, or even looking for grants, not just through ratepayers, but all different financial needs. We've categorized this into immediate needs, kind of intermediate needs, and that longer term of 20 years as I look, we still want to get a look at any of these that really can't be done in that time frame. If there's some real needs, as I mentioned, that this is a type of system that really needs to be looked at almost immediately. However, that being said, we do have some fairly large capital plans and capital improvements in your plan for treatment and supply that do meet the needs of the efficiencies of the existing system. That being said, there's a starting place, as I mentioned before, to rehabilitate well number 8. That would be our first step, because if we can get that up to full capacity, rehabilitate that, and use that while the next project is then started and potentially taking offline, so that you can build upon your successes. Start slow, but plan for the future. And that kind of intermediate need of that 2 million gallon treatment plant that is so valuable to your community about reliable water quality. I think that planning, over a 10-year period, it takes at least 5 years to get a plant like that kind of off the ground and up to speed, and then a few years to operate it. So knowing this long term, you can do those immediate planning needs now. And so we wanted to bring this to your attention. It's not just treatment supply, but we've looked at the entire gamut of distribution system. Lead service replacement is on here. We have some other rehabilitations of those wells. It's gate upgrades. I mentioned the auxiliary power. So it's an all-inclusive, high-level look at the entire system as one. We're not saying it all has to be paid for tomorrow. It should be looked at over that next 5 to 10 year period of how you're going to pay for those, with grants involved or other funding sources. So that being said, Adam has a copy of that report. We'd love to have you dive more into it. We can answer some more questions. Adam's always good at getting us additional questions, and we'd be happy to answer your questions on.
I have a question for you on the, right now pump 5 is the only one that's being treated. Everything else is going directly into the system.
Correct.
So have you done test wells or something? I mean, how do you know the other wells are gonna need to have a water treatment plant?
Yeah, you can go back to that slide, Dan, with where the water quality is. So we've worked with your staff. Your staff really keeps good tabs on how well-performing water quality, those wells are. But we took water quality concentrations, you can see here, and well 5 is the one that's treated, and there's still some iron manganese going out of that. There's some things we can do immediately to correct that, but long-term, it probably needs an upgrade to make sure that media is focused. New wells, most likely in your aquifer, generally are going to need treatment around here. There's iron and manganese in your water table, so treatment is here. Number 8 had treatment on it. Number 8 is where I mentioned there was some treatment tanks that are still left in place. They're just out of service.
Okay.
So they're just taking up space right now. But again, all of them I would recommend having some sort of treatment on them over time. When you rehabilitate a well, generally you're going to have better water quality immediately, but it does, in the sand and gravel aquifer, well over time come back and really kind of cause some havoc with those wells. So you got to maintain those generally every 5 years.
So the treatment plant's more of a down the road type thing.
Well, Adam and I were talking about that. If you definitely want to plan for a treatment plant, it takes a number of years just to get instituted financing for it and the planning. Again, I've seen treatment plant take up to 5 to 10 years to plan for it. So we wouldn't recommend doing that right out of the gate, that big water treatment plant. because you need some other reliable wells before you get to that point. So our recommendation was to put well number 8 first, upgrade that building and its filtration, so that when you do have that next bigger project, that's there and that's reliable for you.
And I would just say, in terms of well number 5, you know, the workhorse well, it's the oldest well. There are deficiencies and concerns. The guys can, here, they can tell you, it's showing its age, and there are some reliability questions, and all these areas we're talking about using, the city owns the land already. We would do test wells before we do a full-blown well to make sure we're not getting into something incredibly, you know, water quality problem, but this is kind of a common, you know, water quality problem in where we're pulling the water from. But as much as well number 5 is the workhorse and his treatment, and there are issues, it is just some of it's below grade. So I mean, if a pipe bursts, the control panels, things like that will flood, and the well will be done, basically. So there's some very large concerns there, you know, that it is our workhorse, but it also is our oldest and getting close to being, you know, needing to be replaced completely. So, so like you said, doing some of these smaller things in preparation of that replacement of that big one is important, so we're not down and we have some reliability built in. And there's other things that are deficient that we've talked about in the past, whether it be, you know, power supply. One of our wells has a generator. We don't have backup power supply at other facilities. So that, you know, well number 9 has VOCs and they're filtered out. Since the city took over the water utility, well number 9 was about the only project we've done regarding treatment, and that was paid for by the DNR. The city has not capital planned out or prioritized any treatment or pumping projects or supply projects in the 16 years that we have owned it. And obviously we took it over in not so great condition, so it's only aged since then. So it's a lot to look at numbers wise, but some of the urgency is necessary to begin planning these things out in the next 10 years, because of the just no investment in it and as well the age. So
Now, the other question I have is 2007 is when we had the maximum water usage in a day. Now, didn't we have the cookie factory? I mean, and it was in August.
Correct.
I mean, we have a couple of businesses that are no longer here with that, so we're not going to be we will probably never use that water like that again unless we get businesses back in here. Is that a fair assessment to use something when we don't even have the businesses anymore?
I think it's a fair acknowledgement of that, but what I do want to look at is, you can see you are approaching in different years. Even 2016 was a wet year.
Yeah.
That's still almost 1.8 million. Not far off of that 2.44. I think in 2007, what I understood from it was a drought year plus a large fire in a large industry that used a number at the same time, so that was kind of the worst case scenario.
Okay.
But in planning, and I'll just say that, I mean, that's a fair assessment. In planning for a community of your size, I'll say less than 50,000, generally, this is the 10 state standards and EPA's way of helping communities like yours to plan. Now, will that happen every year? Absolutely not. And we hope that doesn't happen every year, so we didn't plan very well. However, if we can look into the future and when those might happen, that's really the quantity of water that we need, and that's the supply. we're really only saying you need one more well. I think where my fear comes in for you, as Adam was saying, is the reliability in some of your other things, water quality, location, ability to maintain certain wells that are absolutely necessary if you were to ever need that. So that's a good planning tool, a good number to plan by, but definitely we wouldn't want to plan any higher than that. If we were, I'll say if you're a larger community with multiple pressure zones, we might take that into account and then move it up or down based on different demand ratios within that system. This one is pretty straightforward demand ratio, and to plan for that year I think is very adequate. You already have the pieces in place for it, except for the water quality. That's what's really driving capital costs, is the water quality, not quantity.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Just to bring up one other item that, excuse me, I think Randy glossed over a little bit, but the acronym here, WSIR, that's Well Site Investigation Report. The question was asked about, looking to replace well 5. That's the critical piece to site the new well, and if you're decommissioning well 5 at some point, the additional wells. So we show wells 10 and 11 there. DNR will require a well site investigation report for both of those new wells to make sure that all the setbacks are met, interferences between wells aren't an issue, those types of activities. So really that's the beginning of the planning for the future replacement well and treatment facility is those well site investigation reports, independent of rehabilitation of well 8.
It looks like both proposals for the 2 different well sites were near Mill Pond. Would that have any effect on the current water level in that area?
You're saying the location of this well and these wells on this side affect on the water level here?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if any of the proposal will have an effect that people that like to
Sure.
recreate there. Will there be any potential change of water level?
I would say no, but to Dan's point, that's what these well site investigation reports are for. And we do have to have some requirement setbacks from that. We have to be below certain areas your wells are very deep, and so they do not affect the surface water. However, we do have to make sure that all geology and hydrogeology work together so that we do not affect those. That's a state code that we have to have a permit for doing test wells to make sure that it's happening. So I would say yes, it will not affect it. However, we have to prove that. If it were during the testing results, if it were to impact it, we would definitely move to a different location, try to find a site that was more suitable so it didn't impact the environment.
One thing to also keep in mind is almost 50% of your water right now is coming out of well 5, which is right along that same area. So with the assumption that as improvements are made, you're less reliant upon any one well, in theory, you may see a reduction of water withdrawn from this particular location.
And those locations closer to the river and closer to the lake, from what I understand, they're prime locations for water quality, as bad as some of it is, because we've tried wells, I believe, outside of that whole area, and they haven't worked out. So, both of those sites the city already owns as well. We control the property, so we don't have to go out and buy land. So those are kind of 2 reasons why those are identified as locations.
And then as a follow-up to the test well and water quality, help me understand why only iron and manganese are presented under water quality. I'm assuming, VOCs was just mentioned as, I know there's a plethora of things that one has to worry about. Perhaps maybe explain why only those 2, and then maybe furthermore, where could someone go if they wanted the full report of all things related to water quality?
First, to answer that question at the end, you can go to DNR's website. They have an open website that your team reports on annually or quarterly, depending on when they're supposed to.
necessarily with a rate case, looking at, what these future expenses are going to be. I would guess we would take the top 5-year plan and incorporate some of those numbers into a rate case. We would then begin looking at immediately as well, the intermediate needs, looking at funding opportunities at a staff level and bring those forward as time goes by. There's no approval of this that's needed from the council level. Yes, there are next steps that we'll have administratively, but this is mostly informational and kind of sets the tone as to where, staff will be focusing our efforts in the water utility in the next 5 to 10 years. And so that's where it kind of goes from here with the list of things to start checking off.
Thank you. And thank you again, Joe.
New versus used, obviously something to look at. We're talking about rehabilitating well heaps. Number 5 is our current workhorse. Is number 5 able to be rehabilitated like number 8? We're talking about rebuilding 8 that we're not really using, but number 5 is our workhorse. Always has been. Can we rehabilitate 5 for 1.2 million versus spending 11.5 million on a new facility and a new well?
So there's a couple of things there. It comes down to, first and foremost, well number 5 is not on city-owned property. It is still on Alliant Energy property. So controlling the site in which we are using the well is important. Rehabilitating it, we would just have to come down to, a cost of looking at, what it would really take. And it may very well be just as much based on the current condition of that well, because we're talking about the main controls of it being underground. All of that is not code compliant. Bringing it up to code may cost nearly as much as what a new well would cost for full compliance. So I think they had talked about reusing the well portion of it and using the well and then pumping it over to a treatment facility versus the whole well and treatment facility. But really it comes down to the reliability of that full well site, 5, and it really probably costing you guys, as much to get it to code as a new one.
Yeah, I'd say you hit 90% of what I would have said. The other thing on top of all 5, all of the products we have here
Would you, Al? Yes. All right, who was the second? Paige, so moved by Al, seconded by Paige. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, go ahead.
So we don't need a date to end, so by the next meeting, we could have someone apply and we can move on that.
Was that like a rolling thing? So
Deadline is passed, anybody interested, please.
Just for a reminder, the original timeline had our first August meeting as interview.
so we could still do that. We could still do that. We just wouldn't have a preliminary review. We would just have jump right into it. I don't anticipate 5 people all of a sudden signing up. So.
All right, so all those in favor of removing the deadline for council or District 2 positions, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is approved. Next item is the city GIS proposal, put together by MSA. Adam, you want to start this one?
So we reviewed this at the Public Works Committee meeting on July 15th and have recommended approval to the Common Council for this GIS proposal. So for those not familiar with GIS, there's a whole packet of information on what it is. So basically, this is an asset management software that is put together and customized by MSA to use for city staff to just track, manage, and evaluate our utility systems primarily. It gets into other avenues like zoning and wards. There's public viewing options. So it's really taking a comprehensive map of the city and layering it and layering it and layering it to provide information. So, for example, we have current paper maps that we have all of our water pipes, all of our sewer pipes, all of our storm sewer. All those would be digitized, would be GPS located here by MSA staff within 2 inches of accuracy. We would map everything out. It's kind of a step-by-step implementation in their proposal that kind of spells out how it sort of works with a total cost of $45,862 to begin with. It is very intense to begin with, and then sort of in terms of cost, it then tapers out over time. So at the end of the day, when we talk about managing our utilities, when we talk about providing resources for staff, in terms of utilities, this is incredibly valuable and allows us to get off of paper tracking to create digital records for the utility moving forward. The goal in the end of all this is to have this digital mapping in the field where you do hydrant flushes. Right there on a tablet, you mark that down. We talk about water loss. We can calculate that right on the scene. Cross-connection inspections in the field, implementing this tool to better track everything. So when we're doing things, it's not just on paper, okay? As well as then knowing where stuff is. There are facilities that we have no clue when we get out to a locate if there's anything there, So it's a big cost, but to be frank, this is necessary to operate our city. Okay, this is a necessary spend and a management tool that water, sewer, public works, administration, everybody can use. So we're asking that we can move forward with this. We would pay for it through a combination of funds. So we can use everything from water, sewer, general fund, fifth district funds, rescue plan funds. The idea would be to start this year, and at the end of the year, when the bills come in, to determine where it gets split out, with only using rescue plan funds if necessary. To be honest, I mean, we may be able to get it done just within the utility budgets and everything like that. But the vision here is GPS located. And then at the very basic, this you have maps up and running that show all of our utilities on a screen that can be changed and manipulated, with then us growing into it to implementing this in the field to do inspections and to track things for PSC reporting, have, basically customizing it to our needs. That's all I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions. It takes a good 2-3 years to get this thing running. And that's why I kind of brought it forward urgently, because I think we are already a bit behind and really need to try to get this in our hands so we can better respond and better record what we're doing.
This seems like something that is extremely important. As you said, this is necessary to operate our city. So it seems like, first of all, thank you for identifying that it's an issue that we have. Maybe this seems a little out there, but I asked just because I saw something on 60 Minutes about this. Is there any concerns about, technology, the more that we are laying out in technology? Do we have any vulnerabilities? As far as the 60-minute episode was what, hacking into some small town, things like that. Like with this company, can you talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is all done through ArcGIS, which is a secure platform that we set up, passwords, and we have, providing access to this to the public. You would have to literally hack in to get the details. We can provide a voting map out to the public, or a zoning map, and it does, from a security standpoint, yes, hacking in and knowing where water system features are and trying to manipulate things, we would be pretty secure with all of this. We have a SCADA system. There was a news story about a SCADA system. We have that existing. There's a community in Georgia that had the SCADA system hacked, and they can take down your well. This is very different. This just maps the infrastructure, doesn't control it. So the worst somebody can do is find out where our well is, which they already know. So it's relatively secure, and anybody can look outside and see a manhole anyway. So,
Same question in a sense, who would have access to log in? And would it be only an upload capacity, a deletion capacity? What could they get in there? Could somebody go in there and go, oh, I'm going to update this?
yeah, so we would have user accounts, manipulator, master accounts for only a select few of individuals. So like utility manager, utility workers, DPW, maybe myself, that could go in. We wouldn't be paying for like every single person to have that kind of access. There would be departmental access is granted and accounts set up, so we're not blowing money basically. And then everything that's done is tracked. So if you delete something, you delete it, you can put it back in. And so it's really, if you map out a water line and you go in there and you start to manipulate it and you delete it accidentally, you can always put it right back in. It's kind of, I'm not saying it's foolproof, but it does track a lot of imagine this, hitting our general fund, very much, it would be taken on and spread across multiple funds.
Make a motion to approve.
Moved by Paige, seconded by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of authorizing the city to move forward with the GIS proposal, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the janitorial services contract. Adam?
So as I know here, a full-time janitor will be retiring not at the end of August, that's Chris, so it'll be it'll be in September. So I apologize for that confusion, but we just have retirements happening, so kind of all blending together around the same time. We issued the RFP. We had two cleaning companies come in and put in bids to clean City Hall and Public Works, and Simply Elite Cleaning out of Ripon, just outside of town here, proposed an annual fee of $23,880. There's another company that provided a higher quote. I kind of put a letter together here with all the information. So that we did. So we're looking to approve a contract with Simply Elite Cleaning to take over janitorial services for City Hall and Public Works. So, and just to be clear, this would be like 2 days a week at City Hall, 1 day a week at Public Works. There would be additional cleaning services that we're currently not doing, like, I don't know if it's worth shampooing this carpet, but they can do it. On top of then, taking care of the floors a little bit better with, waxing and all that stuff. Outside windows will be done. So there's a far more comprehensive list of things that we will get cleaned under this, as well as, emergency cleanings and, during winter time, obviously, when the floors get all messed up, they'll be here more frequently than 2 days if necessary. So, checked all the references. Everybody said they do a nice job everywhere they work. The contract, if we don't like what's going on, at any time with 90 days notice can be terminated.
Is this a one-year contract and renewed yearly?
Yeah, so I believe I have in there that it is a 2 years. Yeah, but we can get out, like I said, with 90 days notice. So the price will basically be locked in for 2 years, and then, at that point, if we renegotiate something or we want to rebid it, we can do that. If at any point we get not showing up or something bad happens, we can also. So they're right out of town, like I said.
Kevin, does this include all the cleaning supplies, the materials other than paperwork?
Yes. So they will take care of all. Yep, they will provide us MSDS sheets on everything that they want to use. So they bring those in. They bring their vacuums in. All we're providing are towels and toilet paper and all the stuff that Mike buys in bulk. So we've got that all taken care of. But we want to buy cleaning supplies anymore too. So that's nice.
I would move to approve the contract with Simply Elite Cleaning of Ripon at a total of $23,880 annually for a 2-year contract.
Second that.
Been moved by Al, seconded by Howard. Any further discussion?
Question on that. Now, you're talking about having them come in and do special things. I think it's above and beyond the
Supplementary has their own custodian.
Yeah, what?
They have their own custodian, part-time.
Again, we give them a lot of money. Yeah, spend it however they want.
Any further questions or discussion on this motion?
Seems nice that we can go with a local company.
All right, all those in favor of approving the janitorial services contract with, here we go. Simply Elite Cleaning of Ripon, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is approved. All right. Project update and staff reports. Adam.
Just quickly here, you're probably wondering the 2022 budget. We are on a staff level beginning to work on that. And we'll bring reports coming in August here to kind of get that rolling. Senior Activity Center, I did have a meeting with Fond du Lac County and the county executive. That was very encouraging in terms of their involvement. So we'll report on that hopefully in the next couple weeks here, and then we will have a follow-up scoping meeting tomorrow in preparation for a public meeting on the Senior Activity Center